There's a moment in my career that I remember very clearly, and it still hurts a little bit when I think about it. And that moment was when I was not promoted, and a colleague of mine who was doing a similar role, a peer, was. We were doing similar work, and when his promotion came through, I felt hurt. I felt devastated, to be honest. And I remember I was going to speak with my manager, and I asked my manager why him, why I was not promoted. And, his answer was not super clear, and that even frustrated me more. It wasn't super concrete. He said, "You're not strategic enough, you're not visible enough, you're not ready." But when I asked him, okay, what does it even mean? He couldn't really explain. And, back then I didn't get it. I felt like, why not me? I was frustrated. I was hurt. And you know what is the worst part? I was questioning myself. I was starting to ask, am I even leadership material? Am I good enough at what I do? But when I think about it now, I think back, I can see why my manager couldn't promote me. Because I was then focused on execution, not on strategy. I was focused on my team, not on building relationships across the organization. I was not thinking about stakeholders. I was not thinking about who should know me, who should know what I do, who should know the impact I'm making. And, when I think about the colleague who got promoted, I assume he was more intentional about making himself visible. He invested in building relationships and thought about strategy, not just execution. So, of course, he was the natural choice for a promotion. Back then, I didn't see that, but I do see it now. And unfortunately, I lived that pattern for years. I worked hard, keeping my heads down, not bragging, right? Not advocating for myself, not building allyship, not building strategic relationships, not making myself visible. And it cost me more than once. Being passed over for promotions, for opportunities. And as I said, the worst thing, it caused me to doubt myself and question whether I was really cut out for leadership. My guest this week, Lalitha, said something that hit home for me. She said, we feel getting the work done is enough and the work speaks for itself. And that's definitely not always true. And when she said that, I thought, yeah, absolutely, I agree. And that was me for many years. And I know that's a lot of you listening to me right now. You're doing a great job. You know you are. Somehow, it's not translating into the growth you expect. And you're wondering what you're doing wrong. So I want to share with you today what I learned and what I wish someone had told me earlier and what I would do differently if I could go back in time. Welcome to From a Woman to a Leader, the podcast for ambitious leaders in tech who are ready to grow their confidence, influence, and leadership without burning out or pretending to be someone they're not. I'm your host, Limor Bergman. Before I get into the practical stuff, I wanted to talk about something that Lalitha brought up in our conversation. She called it the mammoth in the room, impostor syndrome. The reason I want to talk about that before I give any advice is because impostor syndrome is the very thing that stops us from doing what I'm going to suggest to you today. It's that voice in your head that says, who am I to put myself out there? Why would anyone care about what I think? Why would I bother building relationships? I should just focus on my work. And even thinking if I talk about myself, I'm bragging. It's a negative thing. Does it sound familiar to you? I felt that a lot in my career. When I started managing for the first time, I just got from maternity leave. I had no clue what I was doing. So obviously I felt like an imposter. When I grew into a senior manager role and I started managing managers, I was thinking, do I even know how to do that? Do I know how to manage managers? When I stepped into the director role and I started, taking on a wider business responsibility, I doubted myself. When I started my own business. And even today, honestly, when a client decides I'm not the right coach for them, I ask myself, am I a good coach? So it happens all the time. And I've talked to a lot of senior leaders, public speakers who present at major conferences, and they're all told me the same thing. They feel it too. So here's what I want you to know. Imposter syndrome doesn't go away. It shows up every time you stretch yourself into something new. And that's actually a sign that you are growing. The goal is not to eliminate it. The goal is to recognize it when it happens and not let it stop you from doing what you need to do. Because the women I coach, the reason they don't advocate for themselves, the reason they don't build visibility is not because they don't know it's important. It's because there's a voice in their head that tells them they shouldn't do it, that the work should be enough, that putting themselves out there feels like bragging. Today, I want to challenge how you think about visibility. Because like me and many women that I coach, we think that making ourselves visible is self-promotion. It's bragging. It's inauthentic. It feels like showing off, like talking about ourselves and how great we are. And obviously, it feels very uncomfortable. I want to reframe that today and ask you, what if visibility is actually a form of responsibility? Let's think about it this way. If you don't speak for your work, you're putting the entire burden on your manager. Your manager has to fight for your promotion alone. They have to convince people who have never heard your name or don't know you well enough that you deserve to move up. And Lalitha actually in the episode this week shared exactly that. She shared a story about a person that their manager really fought for their promotion and literally no one else knew that person. And she said the amount of effort it takes to get those promotions through is so much harder. It falls entirely on the manager's shoulder. And as she put it, people got to be lucky to get such nice managers. And I live that. I live that also from the employee side and also as the manager side. When I was a manager, I'll share a quick story. I had an engineer on my team, incredibly talented engineer, very, very smart. He did an incredible work. But he was very, very quiet and introverted person. He felt very uncomfortable speaking up, presenting, being visible. And I share with him how important it is. I try to push him to present, but it didn't work. He was always shying away. And surprise, surprise, when the time comes for promotion, I was fighting so hard for him. And it was so difficult because outside the immediate circle of engineers who worked closely with him, no one else knew him well enough. I mean, yes, they knew his name, but they didn't know how good he was. So the people who needed to approve that promotion had never seen his work, never heard him speak, never interacted with him. So think about that. Your manager might believe in you completely, but they're not the only one making the decision, especially as you grow into more senior roles. And that's usually a committee, a group of people, of stakeholders. And if the only person who can speak to your impact is your manager, you are making their job incredibly hard. And you are living your career up to luck. And that's not bragging. That's actually taking responsibility for your own growth and also helping your manager to help you. So knowing all that, what do you actually do about it? Because I know my audience, I know that the first question you're probably asking is, okay, Limor, but how? How do I actually do that without feeling complete fake? So I want to share 3 things that I've learned from my own career and from working with hundreds of women that I coach. The first thing is get clear on what you want and share it with your manager. Because it all starts with intention. What does growth look like to you? This is the question I want you to ask yourself, because growth looks differently for different people. And I'll tell you, the answer is not always obvious. I have so many clients who are still trying to figure that out. Do I want to stay on the technical track? Do I want to move to a manager? Do I want to stay in engineering? Do I want to explore something else? And I'll be completely honest with you, it wasn't always clear to me either. Up until I got to a staff engineering level, I didn't even realize that I was actually wanted to become a manager. Only when I was promoted to staff, I started asking myself those questions, and I started asking for opportunities to lead, starting small, leading client interactions, and eventually, luckily for me, there was an opening for a manager position. But if I was more intentional about it, more clear to myself about what I wanted, I probably would have been there much faster. So once you know what you want, even if it is a general direction, share it with your manager. And yes, I know, this is where a lot of people hesitate. Because let me give you an example. Let's say you're a manager and you want to become a director. But there is no director opening and your manager is a director, so you're thinking, I can't tell that to my manager. It's going to sound like I'm trying to take their job. So I want to challenge you to think about it differently. Your manager probably doesn't want to stay a director for the rest of their career either, right? And there might be opportunities for a director role in other parts of the organization or in the future, or even maybe in different companies some days. Sharing your aspirations with your manager is not saying, I want to take your job. It's saying, this is where I want to grow. Help me develop the skills to get there. And when you share that, ask them, how do you see it? Meaning, ask your manager, what am I missing? What skills do I need to develop? What experiences should I look for? Just having that conversation alone will change how your manager sees you, because now you're not just executing, you're thinking about your growth with intention. The second thing I want to share with you today is taking initiative without being asked. Lalitha, in the episode this week, shared a beautiful example. Early in her career, maybe she was 3 or 4 years, in her career, she noticed a teammate who was struggling, and no one asked her to help. It wasn't part of her role. She didn't have any leadership title. And she sat down with that person and worked through the problem with them. And yes, it slowed her down at first, but then the team velocity doubled. And that's, what I see with the most successful people I work with and coached. And also what helped me progress. They don't wait to be told. They look around and they see problems that no one else is solving, and they step in to solve those problems. And I did that in my own career. I'll give you an example. I formed an architecture working group with senior engineers and architects across different groups. And the idea was very simple. Let's get together, discuss common challenges we are facing, how to build unified solution, how to stop duplicating efforts across team. No one asked me to do that. There was no directive from leadership. I just saw that it was needed, and I took the first step. And you know what I did? Beyond solving actual problems, it changed how people saw me and how my manager saw me, to be honest. I was no longer just someone executing within my team. I was someone who was thinking beyond my role, connecting people across the organization, solving problems at a bigger scale, and that's kind of initiative that makes you visible in the most authentic way possible. You're not talking about yourself, you're solving problems, and then people notice you. This third thing I want to share with you, and this is the one I wish I had understood so much earlier. Build relationships that build into sponsors. Because as you grow in your career, your manager is not the only one who determines whether you are promoted or not. There are other people in the room when those decisions are being made. And you need some of those people to know who you are, to know the impact you're making, to be willing to speak on your behalf. And you have to start thinking about who those people are. Who should you know? It could be someone up the leadership chain, a peer in a different team, someone in product, design, sales, maybe other functions. And think about how to build a genuine relationship with them. Not by putting like a recurring meeting on their calendar, but by figuring out what is important to them, what challenges they're dealing with, and seeing if there are ways you can help, even if it's just giving a perspective, sharing your ideas. And let me tell you a story that I think about often. When I was promoted to an engineering manager for the first time, it wasn't just because I asked for it. It happened because I had someone who supported me. I was, when the engineering manager position opened up, I was 8 months pregnant, and then I went on maternity leave. And I was told I was getting a phone call when I was on maternity leave that I was promoted. And what happened was that a former manager of mine, someone I had worked with, someone who knew my work, with seeing me and seeing what I was capable for, spoke on my behalf. And thanks to him, the hiring manager, my future manager, agreed to give me that opportunity. I didn't even know it was happening. I didn't know someone else was in the room advocating for me while I was at home with my baby. And when I came back and found out about what happened, it was one of those meaningful moments in my career. Not because I got the role. Obviously I got the role and I was happy about it, but because someone believed in me enough to put their own credibility on the line for me. And if it wasn't for that person, I would not have gotten that opportunity. And that's the power of building genuine relationships. You don't always know who is watching. You don't always know who is paying attention. You don't always know who is going to speak up for you. But when you show up with genuine curiosity, when you help people, when you build real connections, some of those people will become your sponsors and they will speak for you in rooms you're not in. So if I can go back to that version of me, the one who just watched her colleague get promoted, the one who sat in her manager's office and heard you're not strategic enough, you're not visible enough, you're not ready, I will tell her, you are ready. You just don't know it yet. And the things that are holding you back are not your skills. It's that you're waiting for someone to notice you instead of making sure they do. So I want to ask you today the same thing. What do you want? Not in 5 years, right now. What's the first step you can take today to make it happen? It could be having a conversation with your manager about where you want to grow. It could be looking around for a problem no one else is solving and stepping in. It could be reaching out to someone in your organization you've been meaning to build a relationship with. Whatever it is, stop waiting for someone to give you permission. Stop waiting for work to speak for itself. Start speaking for yourself. And know that you don't have to do it alone. We all feel doubt. We all feel the imposter syndrome. But that doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do next. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope that was helpful. And if it was, I want to invite you to subscribe to my podcast and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And I'll see you again next week.